Welcome to episode number 162 of the Marine Layer podcast. We have some musings about the final stretch of the Mariners' past road trip. We'll mention a couple of comments that Edgar Martinez made this week about the differences in hitting philosophy he's trying to implement, and we'll take a look at Julio's second half and some of the improvements he's made.
Here's your guys' reminder, stay on top of all of our stuff. The best things you guys can do to really help support us is download these podcast episodes. If you're listening, rate and review 5 stars. If you're watching on YouTube, hit the subscribe button, leave a like on the video, drop a comment, and then follow us on social media across Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, and YouTube Shorts at Marine Layer Pod.
Let's get it rolling.
The pitch from Acevedo. A drive deep to right field. Down the line. The Mariners win this game 2-1. The dream lives. They're going to the playoffs. 1-1 from Jansen. There you go. Left field. We got a tie ball game. Julio. Oh, baby, what a moment. Tie ball game is 7-7.
And we welcome you to this episode of the Marine Layer podcast, part of the Just Baseball Podcast Network, recording on Monday evening, September 9th, and it was very on brand for the Mariners to wait for week 1 of the NFL season to mask the fact they won a road series. Boom.
Boom!
Boom!
Yeah.
I think that isn't the funniest thing about that video, by the way, to totally sidetrack, is now that there's instead of the meme being AJ flexing his muscle in front, the new meme is zooming in on the Rizzler clapping.
Yeah. and then doing whatever he does at the end. The whole like quiets the crowd thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
His thing.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think any of our non-Gen Z audience knew what we just referenced?
No, but you've given me some inspiration. I should bring this up on Brock and Salk and quiz the rest of the show. Do you have any idea who the Rizzler is?
Yeah, you should.
That's
So next time you guys do answer the question, Jerk, you should bring that up. Submit it as your own question.
Or
but also you should grab the soundbite of AJ doing bring the boom
after either a good Seahawks defensive performance or when the Mariners hit a few home runs in a game. Yeah,
or just like whenever you have control of the soundboard. You can drop it whenever.
That's true. Yeah, I might have to do that. All right.
Like if they're talking about someone being physical, it's like, yeah, guys, yeah, like this.
Yeah, bring the boom. But who gets a doom? Well, actually, not even the Mariners get a doom after this weekend because, they won their first road series that was not against the White Sox or A's, that was also 3 games or more in 4 months.
Yeah, it's brilliant. They played 2 of their best offensive games of the season and managed to sandwich it around their worst one. It's incredible. And they managed to, again, mask it behind just a wall of football.
Mm-hmm.
Was that on purpose?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, it'd be fitting. I'll say that. It'd be fitting. Because, how much of the Mariners did you watch on Sunday? I only watched a little bit.
I watched more of Saturday. I picked the wrong game to watch this weekend.
Yeah, I watched a decent amount of Saturdays, which, like you said, that was a mistake.
Yeah.
As Thanos would say.
I would have rather watched Sunday, but...
Yeah, we got engulfed in week 1 of the NFL season, just like the rest of the world. Shocker.
I know. Maybe, Lyle, the reason the Mariners started playing a little bit better over the last half of this road trip, which it's actually kind of funny to think about, this road trip that they finished 5-5. It was probably the worst 5-game start to a road trip they had. Second worst after the stretch that got Scott Service fired. But the second worst start to a road stretch this season, the first 5 games of that road trip where they got walked off 3 times. And then the final 5 games were actually, were good, especially offensively. So that leads to some writers, Adam Jude and Daniel Kramer, writing some pieces about the Mariners' offense today. And there were some quotes from Edgar Martinez. I'm going to quote from Daniel Kramer's article about some of the things the Mariners have been doing different offensively when Edgar Martinez has been leading it. I'm going to throw this out there. I'm going to get your thoughts on what he says in this. So I'm not going to try and take this quote out of context too much, but the premise of the article was, the Mariners' processes and how, Edgar's trying to communicate that to his players and how they're trying to simplify their offensive progress. So here's a quote from Edgar Martinez when talking about sort of the advanced stuff at hitting that we know the Mariners have looked at quite a lot this season, and especially things that Brant Brown looked at. So Edgar said, quote, "I don't look at that stuff that much. I mean, for me, batting average, runs scored, RBIs, on-base percentage, those are the stats I look at. The other ones, exit velocity, launch angle, they're two examples he uses. I don't care if you have an exit velocity of 120 miles an hour, but if you have the wrong swing, you're going to hit for a low average, and the production is not going to be that great." So he adds on after that before you react. Because the game today is so mechanical, there's so much emphasis on mechanics, and that sometimes hitters are thinking too much in mechanics, like hitting the ball in the air at a high exit velocity. Hitters are thinking too much where they should be focusing on a plan, an approach, and just squaring the ball up, not where my hands are, all this stuff, mechanics. When you think too much about mechanics, it can be difficult to hit the baseball. Lyle.
Edgar Martinez was one of the greatest hitters to ever play this game. I think he's the greatest DH to ever play this game. Over Poppy, believe it or not. He's a Hall of Famer. Took him way too long to get in. And clearly the Mariners' offense has turned around in the last 2.5 weeks. That all being said, sad! Fuck batting average and RBIs.
Here's my counter. We know the Mariners weren't, at least outwardly to the media, telling us that when they were looking to evaluate good offensive performance, they were not looking at batting average, RBIs, on-base percentage to evaluate their offense. Now, what exactly were they doing? It was a mix of jargon. People like saying control the zone. We think of it as just a very detailed, very strategic offensive approach. Like, that's the premise of what Brant Brown was trying to bring in. You know what happened with that approach, Lyle? What happened with that approach?
They didn't hit for a high batting average, but they didn't do anything well.
No, they didn't. So what? So here's the thing. I'm not with this argument here arguing that batting average and RBIs are good stats. They are extremely flawed statistics. But if Edgar's literally his goal here is to try and simplify things to the most basic level possible, because when they've tried to complicate things with this offense this year, it has not worked. It got 2 hitting coaches fired and the manager fired. Is being more simple in having this experiment for a month and change. Like, you don't have much to lose by just trying it a different way, trying it Edgar's way, and see if something clicks. Because even if our opinions on batting average and RBIs is correct, and like we point out the clear flaws in using those stats to evaluate offensive performance. Well, if it doesn't resonate with the team, then it doesn't matter what we think, because then the team can't hit. If it does not compute the way that it's communicated, like in a more advanced teaching of hitting, if that doesn't compute, then you got to try something else. And this is clearly something else.
Okay, in all seriousness, it's obviously working. And Edgar makes some valid points in what he's saying. Obviously, the guy's an incredibly smart hitter and insanely smart about hitting in Major League Baseball. He knows way more than I know. So, in all seriousness, yes, there's valid points being made to everything he's saying. However, there's bits and commitments we have to stick to on this podcast. So, obviously, I sit here and say, fuck batting average and RBIs. Because, well, once again, like, for anybody that's going to reply in the comments, because there's going to be some of you, there always is, how is judging a player by RBIs valid in any way, shape, or form? It is totally dependent on who is on base for you. You know who doesn't get on base a lot? The Mariners. They strike out more than anybody in the league by a ton.
He did say he was focusing on on-base percentage, too.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
So, and Edgar probably can look... So we understand RBI is a flawed stat, but we can also look at the Mariners' stats this year, Lyle, and notice that Cal Raleigh has twice as many RBIs as the next closest Mariner this year. When you look at that and you say, well, that doesn't quite look right.
Well, that's not good.
How are we going to fix this? Well, it starts with, Lyle, just getting on base more.
Yes. Listen,
you know what's really funny? You know what's really funny about all this? We essentially have teleported back to Jack Z baseball with that sentence.
Which is why I'm hereby rejecting all of this. I don't want to go back to Jack Z baseball. Does anybody have fond memories of the Jack Z era? I don't.
You know there are going to be people in our comments who said that he brought in more hitters.
Yeah, he signed them.
Yeah.
He was allowed to go out and sign Robinson Cano to a $240 million deal in free agency. Are those type of deals even on the table at this point? My answer is no. So,
No.
If Jerry Dipoto had the
Jack
chance...
Z is smiling somewhere reading that quote.
Yeah.
Who, by the way, Edgar started in 15, right? So
Yeah.
he would have had a little bit of overlap.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Wow.
Wonder what Edgar
What they
thinks.
talked about.
Batting average, RBIs.
Notice Edgar didn't say home runs, though. Jack Z was a big home run guy.
Mm-hmm. No, it's true. Yeah, I mean, Jack Z got nervous in 2015 and traded for Mark Trumbo. So, yeah.
I will say, let's go back to that first paragraph I read, what Edgar is talking about. So this sentence right here, I don't care if you have an exit velocity of 120 miles an hour, but if you have the wrong swing, you're going to hit for a low average and the production is not going to be that great. Who's the one player who pops right into my mind on this team when he says that sentence?
I would say that would be the guy playing center field.
Yeah. And is he wrong?
No, and we can get to him in a minute here. But look, it's working, right? It's working. The Mariners are also fourth in WRC plus since Edgar's taken over as the hitting coach when they were a bottom 8 to 10 team in the league all year. So to say, well, looking at the analytics is dumb, they were awful in the basic stats. They were awful in the analytical advanced stats. So pick your poison. They were awful at everything. So look, if the message is getting through to the players more that batting average is important, on base is important, RBIs are important, great. Ultimately, we want the team to win games. That's the real stat that matters the most. How many wins you have in the win column. But for anybody that and now this is no longer an Edgar thing. Again, because clearly, in all seriousness, despite the wording and joking around I used at the start of this segment, it's clearly working and it's resonating with the players. But this is now more a message to the people that'll say, this is why analytics is destroying the game. No, the Mariners were awful in every category. It's not because they were looking at WRC plus on Fangraphs. That's not why they weren't hitting. If Edgar's messaging is different and it's resonating with the guys, great. But guess what? Along with them hitting for more average now, in the last 2.5 weeks, like you found, TJ, this was your stat. They're, like I just said, they're fourth in WRC plus in baseball since Edgar took over as the hitting coach. So it's across the board. The analytics say, oh, they've been good too.
And it's not like they don't use whatever you qualify as analytics if they're not looking at video of at-bats or looking at like heat maps of pitchers. It's not like that stuff doesn't exist. The Mariners did not fire all their analytics stats when the staffers when they fired Scott Service.
Right.
Those guys still work for the team. So, and it is noted in this article, Edgar says, the analytics staff handles that. I don't. Which you could also say, well, he's also only the interim hitting coach. The interim hitting coach doesn't need to have a full handle on the analytics staff as well.
Sure.
That's a valid point there.
And you know what? Now my gears have been grinded about this, so I'm going to spend 60 seconds on this. 60 seconds. Analytics is the biggest crutch word in all of sports for people who just don't understand what it means. Listen to any broadcast of any boomer who fails to comply with understanding analytics, and they'll use it as like a word in negative connotation. Well, the analytics say this. What's that?
A crutch word is what you're looking for.
Yeah. Again, it is the biggest crutch word in all of sports, not just baseball, but sports. When people don't understand how they work and why they're being used, they use it, and the tone and inflection in their voice paired with how they're phrasing it, they put it into a negative connotation. Where if you were to say, okay, here's why WRC plus is a little bit flawed, or here's why WAR is a little bit flawed, or in the NFL, here's why going for it on fourth down in this situation I think is a little bit flawed, and you made a valid point, then fine. But there are people, whether it's on TV or in social media comments or anywhere in between, that say, oh, analytics this, analytics that. No, it's because you don't understand them and you're using it as a crutch word.
It's literally just complaining is what
Correct.
it is.
Yeah. So there's my 60 seconds. Again, you grinded my gears about this, or well, the topic grinded my gears about this. So I want to get that off my chest. The people need to hear this.
Well, thank you for that, Edgar. And we got a good bit from Lyle there. Thank you for that, Edgar.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you, Edgar. Not only have you somewhat fixed this offense in the short term, but you've riled me up. You got me going. Again, learn analytics, people.
I will say I wasn't expecting to get this fired up in such a lull of Mariners baseball.
I mean, we can be transparent here, right? We're in the trust tree with all of our listeners. Yeah. We're sitting here these days and we're like, we are running out of things to talk about because they're doing the same, like how many new storylines are there at this point? It is nice, I will say, that at time of recording, they're within 3 games of that wild card spot and they've played a little bit better as of late. But we're sitting here. It's like, well, what's new? What can really be broken down? Julio, which we're about to do in a minute, but there's not a lot. There's really, really not a lot these days.
It's the new hitting coach is what it is.
Yeah. And hopefully, you know what? Hopefully the Mariners get on a heater here and give people a reason to be excited here in September. However, my hopes at this point are still pretty low. I mean, we still did declare the season over a couple weeks ago. So
yeah, we can't go back on that.
Yeah.
We can't be two-faced. We're still only in the second week of September. We can't turn it around in 2 weeks.
Listen, the people in the organization should honestly be thanking us, players included, because if they make the playoffs, we'll say we gave them bulletin board material.
They can put us the compilation they put together of people declaring them dead, like they did that with Trevor Plouffe when they made the playoffs in 22. Instead, we can be first.
No, I'm down. They can put us in the video. They can clip us saying on that episode where Scott Service got fired, where I start everything off. I need 30 to 60 seconds to say something before we get into this Service episode. Season's over. Season's over. And I think we said it, and you were like, I'm doubling down with you. I agree. We put it in our social media reactions, et cetera, et cetera. You know what? If we're really giving these guys bulletin board material, let's just give them some more here. They're getting their shit rocked by the Rangers this weekend. They got Kumar Rocker making his debut. Jacob deGrom's coming back. Max Scherzer's coming back. That's a recipe for disaster.
I'm not worried about Scherzer, but deGrom is going to strike out 15 in 5 innings. I'm serious. This dude has been waiting to get back on a big league mound for a year and a half now. You don't think he's going to come out and sit 101 for 5 innings?
Oh,
You'll be lying to yourself.
Yeah. Is he throwing any immaculate innings in there too? Again, bulletin board material here for the guys to get motivated.
I'll say yes. I'll say 1. Yeah.
All right. So 5 innings, 15 Ks, 1 immaculate inning. That seems like it'd be about, 55 pitches, 60 pitches.
He won't get hurt in this start.
No, he won't. Actually, if you're going to strike out that many guys, you might throw more than 60 pitches, but whatever.
Kumar Rocker's been striking out. I think he's close to 18 strikeouts per 9 in AAA. Yeah, he's doing pretty good.
Kumar Rocker holds a special place in both of our hearts. So this was long before we ever started the podcast, but in the year 2020, COVID season, 60 games, Mariners are dead set in the middle of their rebuild. We thought Kumar Rocker was basically going to be the second coming of Garrett Cole at the time. We were very big on this campaign that basically went nowhere besides text messages between the two of us and our friends because we didn't have a podcast or much of a platform yet. We had a campaign that was called Rock Bottom for Rocker. Rock Bottom for Rocker was in full force in 2020, at least in our heads, where we said, listen, Kyle Lewis can go off every game. Meanwhile, Justice Sheffield can put together some good starts, a.k.a. the guys we thought they were going to matter down the road. But the team needs to lose every game so they can get Kumar Rocker. Unfortunately, they did not get him.
No, they did not. But instead, they got friend of the pod, Emerson Hancock. Oh, no, I know. That's 21. No, that would have been Harry Ford. Sorry. Got my years mixed up. I will note, our Rock Bottom for Rocker campaign flamed out almost as, not as fast, but almost as effectively as our Tank for Torque campaign the year prior.
Oh, so now we're just filling people in. Yeah, in 2019, did we have slight bias because we went to ASU? Maybe. And because we covered him and called all these games for him. But this dude was essentially the slam dunk number 1 pick in the draft. So in 2019, when the Mariners were even more in a rebuild than 20, and the players on the team meant even less to the future of the Mariners than the 2020 team, when you had Jay Bruce and Edwin Encarnacion, Tim Beckham, all those guys.
Omar Narvaez was on that team.
Yeah. It was guys like that. The bullpen was... Yeah, D was still on the team. The bullpen was all guys that are like no longer here. That year, we were really big on them tanking so they could get Torque. But you know what? Maybe
that year we got friend of the pod, Emerson Hancock.
Yes, we did, and we're happy about it.
Yeah,
because Emerson's the man. And honestly, Emerson slipped in that draft. They thought he could go 2. There were even some people that thought he had a chance to go 1. Mariners got him at 6. So,
and also Torque has not been that good.
So that's what I was going to finish with there, is maybe we actually shouldn't be doing draft evaluation for the Mariners. As much as we like to say we should, and as much as we might like to talk up our games on here, maybe we shouldn't do draft evaluation for the Mariners, because if the Mariners had Kumar Rocker and Spencer Torkelson right now instead of Harry Ford, well, yeah, I mean, well, you can be the judge. Torque.
I would say the book is still out on Rocker and Ford. We'll see.
And Torque. Yeah, I mean, Torque hit 30 homers last year. It's just been a little bit of a struggle for him as a whole.
Yeah. So we'll see on that, but a little insight into down years for the Mariners. You got to find a way to make it fun. We try and make this podcast fun, but what about if the Mariners suck for a whole season? Well, again, you have to find something to make it more entertaining, and that something might include digging deep into the draft class and saying,
yeah, what's gonna if they're not gonna be like this, but if hypothetically the Mariners were atrocious next year, we'd probably have to come on this podcast and start a in the can for Canarella type of campaign. You know, the kid from Clemson? Cam
Clemson,
Canarella?
Yeah. I would say we couldn't. Lavalette would be gone already.
Which one's he again?
The A&M kid. Jace.
Oh.
Yeah, he's outfielder, but he's going to be a junior next year, so he would not. So, if the Mariners, because they couldn't tank this year, because they're already, they're going to be 500 this year. But, if they somehow sucked next year, we would flip it into a campaign, like you said, for what is it, Camarilla?
Canarella, I think. Canarella. Yeah.
Yeah. God, trying to think of a few others. I'm sure there's some kids on Oregon State's team that would be worth it too.
Doyle tweeted out about somebody from Oklahoma at one point. I'm blanking on the kid's name, but if I find it, I'll
if you have a good 2026 draft campaign slogan that we could store away in a bucket just in case we need it, leave it down in the comments section. We'd appreciate it. A little bit of advanced scouting in case of absolute disaster in 2025.
Correct.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Before we get to Julio, let's take a quick pause. We're going to talk to you about our friends over at Pagacci's Pub 85. We're in the peak of sports season, people. It's the best time on the sports calendar. You got the NFL, you got college football, you got Major League Baseball. Playoffs are coming up in baseball. You got the NFL, or the NHL season, the NBA season right around the corner. College basketball too. So all of that, you're going to need a place to watch all these games. Head over there. There's 20 TVs in the place. There's awesome drink specials. Happy hour deals are $3 and $4 drinks. Those specials go from 2 to 6 p.m. on Monday through Friday. In addition, there's awesome food, there's pool tables, there's darts, there's dartboards, everything you need for a good time with your friends over at Pagacci's Pub 85 in Kirkland. So, Julio, it's not a complicated topic, but there's some layers to it, although it's mostly positive. So let's start with the positive. He has had what's been, despite an injury, a very good second half.
A good second half. So since the start of July, he's been a 149 WRC plus. He's been about what Julio Rodriguez has been in his career, minus a little bit of power. But otherwise, offensive production wise across the board, that's been him. I want to start going back to that Edgar quote and how it ties back to Julio Rodriguez. This quote where he says, I don't care how hard you hit the ball, but if you have the wrong swing, you're going to hit for low average. And most importantly, the production is not going to be that great. That sounds like Julio Rodriguez, what he's referencing there. Almost certainly. You could say that with a lot of players on this team, but if there's anyone that represents that quote more than anyone else, it is Julio Rodriguez. You know what the funny thing is? So Edgar's been the hitting coach now, 2 weeks, give or take? 2 weeks and change?
I think 2.5, yeah.
Yeah. So the month of September has essentially been about half of Edgar's tenure. So it's only half of the sample size that Julio has had with Edgar Martinez. But did you know Julio's only striking out 12% of the time this month?
Very, very small sample of games, but yeah, that's a good sign. If you want to look to August too, or basically in this whole stretch he's had, he's striking out less. Since July 4th, you did since the start of July. I did his numbers since July 4th, since our friend Jason Churchill put out this tweet a couple days ago. So I updated it, where he's at a 160 WRC plus, but he's striking out 22% of the time since then. That is way down from where it was once upon a time.
And he had a couple of months where he was striking out a ton. Like he struck out a lot in the small sample of July. He struck out a lot, and he struck out the most in the first month of the season, which was about 33%. But the drop down, like 23% for Julio, is low. But the number that sticks out in the month of September is like that is jarringly low for what Julio Rodriguez has done as a big leaguer. Like that's just not really who he is. Like we expect him to be, if at best, in the low 20s. And yet he's at 12%. And then what else did Edgar say in there? I don't care how hard you hit the ball if you have a bad swing. Well, notice what Julio Rodriguez is doing in the month of September. He's actually hitting the ball softer than he usually does in the month of September. He's not hitting it as hard. It's almost like he's trying to make more contact, and it is making him a more effective. Let me reel that back. More effective is the wrong word for his career sense, but more effective this season is correct.
Mm-hmm.
So he's been more effective by just not selling out, not striking out as much.
Which is great. This has been the best stretch that he's had all season. It's not really close. Obviously, this is a bit of an elongated stretch that we're looking at now because it's about 2 months' time. But it does seem like some of these changes he's made with Edgar are making a difference. Look at what he does in August, right? 713 OPS, 113 WRC plus, which we can get to the bigger picture here in a minute about Julio. That shouldn't be the standards he's held to. He's not paid all the money he's paid to put up a 113 WRC plus every month. No, he's supposed to be an anchor. Numbers like that are not an anchor. But when you look at where he's been a lot of this season, compared to a full month in August, or close to it, I guess, once he got back from the injury, it's better. It's a step forward. And the fact that he's not striking out as much, like, there is progress here.
So let me use 2 month examples here that I didn't have up before, but I have right here. So average exit velocity, most people are familiar with. Over 90 is usually good. Below 90 is usually where you get into the more light-hitting players in baseball. So Julio Rodriguez had an average exit velocity of over 91 miles an hour and a hard hit rate of over 45% in both April and May. So, Lyle, if you hear those numbers, you would assume, oh, pretty productive hitter. He's hitting the ball hard consistently. But Julio wasn't productive in those months. It didn't work for him. The last 2 months, Julio Rodriguez has a hard hit rate under 43% and an exit velocity average exit velocity under 90. And has seen those better results. So that's a little context to what I said. Not hitting the ball as consistently hard, but he is finding more production relative to what he has done this season. Ultimately, this is not the best version of Julio Rodriguez because the best version of Julio Rodriguez needs to use the talent he has, which is hit the ball harder than 98% of players in Major League Baseball. Because not everyone can swing a bat and swing it as fast as Julio does. So you got to be able to utilize that. But if we're guessing what Edgar has brought to Julio is like helping simplify things down, sure. But I remember you guys talked about this quite a bit on Brock and Salk, and Salk brought this number up a few times where he's mentioned how Julio's swinging more than Javi Baez is. So you have the combination of him swinging out of his shoes and just swinging too much. Well, he's brought the swing rate down too last couple of months. So, like, there's these things where he's being more selective. Seems like he's not selling out as much on the results of hitting the ball as hard as he humanly possibly can, because he doesn't need to do that.
No, he's got natural power and natural hard hit ability regardless of what he does. Yeah, he doesn't have to swing out of his shoes. Where do we even go from here? I mean, we've outlined some of the problems that have caused him to have a tough year at the plate already. The fact he hasn't done as much damage on fastballs, the fact that off-speed pitches have killed him this year, especially breaking balls. I don't know how much we've talked about this. His platoon splits are a little odd this year. He has not been a guy that's struggled with one side of the plate in most of his career. In fact, you look at his career platoon splits against righties, his career OPS is 783. Against lefties, it's 827. Right? Against lefties, it's 827. Righties, it's 783. Mm-hmm. This year, he is significantly hitting better against lefties than he is against righties. And I don't know if that has to do with some of the fastballs in that he gets, but this hasn't been some drastic issue until this year.
Fastballs in, breaking balls away. That's how you get Julio out.
Right.
And that's what a righty can do. So that makes sense.
Yeah, but
and it's also a problem because he's going to see righties 80% of the time.
But it's not like lefties can't pin him inside. But against lefties,
no, but their breaking balls don't go outside; they go inside.
Right. I'm just saying he has an 805 OPS against lefties this year and a 657 OPS against righties, where that's way off from his career norm against righties.
It's not quite the Mitch Garver level of not being able to hit a right-on-right breaking ball, but Julio's not been good against sliders and sweepers this year. Mm-mm. So that matches up, and combine that with just being able to throw him a fastball in off the plate and he'll chase it most of the time. He's going to get himself out.
Yeah, hasn't been good against changeups, hasn't been good against curveballs. It's just like basically all off-speed pitches and breaking balls have ate him alive this year.
Yeah, and then we come back to the point where he's now still has even after an 11-game hit streak, his OPS I believe is still under 700.
Mm-hmm. So there has been improvements, and I think Edgar's helping Julio, and clearly the stretch he's been on over the last 2 months has been really good. Again, you just said it, since the start of July, he's 50% above league average as a hitter. Smaller sample because he missed a lot of time, but he has been better. I think how he does the rest of the year is going to be pretty telling. It's going to make a big difference, too.
And he doesn't need to keep striking out only 12% of the time. Just want to see the combination of production and power. He's just not been able to match the two together this year. The right. Power outage has been one of the most telling things of Julio's season. It's not that he doesn't hit the ball hard. It's that he's just not hitting it hard consistently, and he's not hitting it in the air. That is his big issue. And we can go back to the conversation we had with Gary Hill on June or July, when we had him on earlier in the season, where he's essentially outlining of Julio's offensive profile. It's pretty much just the ability that he has to pull the ball in the air. It's just disappeared this year. And a lot of that has been when Edgar talks about the game being too mechanical, Julio's sitting up there thinking a little bit too much and not being able to get around on pitches and pull them in the air. And if Julio is able to pull 6 more pitches in the air this year, how much different does his offensive production look? Drastically different.
Sure. A few more home runs, OPS would be higher, WRC plus would be higher. Different narrative.
And different conversation we'd be sitting here having right now.
So speaking of this conversation, all this encompassing, obviously most of it's positive, but I still do want to ask this question. Does it matter? Like, is Julio doing this really a big sign, or could it be a big difference maker in this season? This is where I'm starting to get caught up, but I want to get your take on this.
No. Literally. If he spends the final 3 weeks of the season on scorched earth, we can revisit this conversation. But this current stretch he's on, no.
Oh, so we're in the same boat then.
Remember what happened last year with his stretch? When he started his August stretch, he was right about where he's been this season, where he was essentially a league average hitter up until August of last year. Maybe slightly above, but still not great. But then he has his August, and all of a sudden you look at his numbers, it's like, wow, it looks exactly like 22. Because the month was that good. But he hasn't had that month to prop up his stats this year. And streaky hitters can use hot months to prop up a season. That's fine. Like, there are people in the Hall of Fame because of that. But that hasn't been the case this year. And this just hasn't been quite hot enough to say season saved. The only way Julio saves his season in a statistical perspective is if he goes nuclear the final 3 weeks of the season and the Mariners make the playoffs. That's it. Otherwise, it will be a failure.
Oh, so we're totally in the same boat here. Yeah, because this is what I was going to say. Even when he was going off in August last year, there was correlation to it. Because what happened when Julio went off in August? The Mariners got into first place in the AL West. They were in a playoff spot. They surged in August. Then in September, they kind of faltered down the stretch. What's happened here is even though Julio started to get hot, which has been sandwiched by an injury that he's had to recover from, the team doesn't look all that more inspiring offensively. Okay, yes, by the numbers, they are 4th in the league in WRC plus over the last 2 weeks. That's great. But let's reiterate. They just won their first 3-game road series that wasn't against the White Sox or A's in 4 months when they beat the Cardinals in 2 of 3 this weekend. And while they're 3 games back of the final wildcard spot and they're creeping closer to Houston, they're at 4.5 now, it still feels like a pretty big uphill climb. And unless they really get really hot here in the final 3 weeks, I still have a hard time believing we're going to be looking up at the end of the season and see this team in a playoff spot. And like you said, that's the whole difference. If Julio gets so hot here in September that he essentially saves the season and wills this team into the playoffs with his bat, yeah, that's a very, very different story. But if he continues to, put together some good games here and put together some good games there, and he ups his season OPS a little bit, he gets it slightly over 700, whatever, and they still miss the playoffs because it was too little too late, the rest of the offense still wasn't hitting enough, he didn't do enough himself, yeah, it doesn't move the needle that much for me.
But also, you can't blame Julio for the Mariners having bullpen struggles. You can't blame Julio for some of the other lineup struggles and some of the roster shuffling. That's not his fault.
No.
While Julio Rodriguez is, and I will say this, is the number one reason the Mariners have failed this season, that doesn't mean while he's heated up since the beginning of July and the Mariners still hasn't won, it's not because he's playing, for example, a selfish brand of baseball that doesn't make a team around him better. That's not the case. He's doing that in spite of other players around him not performing.
Yeah, but also Logan Gilbert leads baseball in WHIP, and the Mariners got shut out in one of his best starts of the year on Saturday, and Logan Gilbert, while pitcher wins and losses are the dumbest stat in all sports, Logan Gilbert's 7-11. So,
do you think Logan's called Felix and asked him about that 2010 season yet?
I hope Felix would pick up his call. I'll say that.
Yeah.
Well, actually, Logan's in Florida in the offseason. They should just visit each other.
Maybe they have.
Yeah, maybe they have, and we just don't know. Yeah, this is the point about Julio. Yeah, that's not what we're saying. I hope that didn't come across that way. Nobody's saying he's playing selfish baseball or anything like that. But ultimately, what this comes down to is, especially if the Mariners don't make the playoffs, at the end of the day, Julio Rodriguez still has an OPS below 700. He has barely been a league average hitter this year. He's finally started to get the WRC plus up over 100 in the last couple of weeks. So what all this says is if he wants to be called a superstar, him having a hot few weeks at the end of the year now isn't changing what my view on him is. Because my view on him is, and it sounds like you're in the same boat, is he has still had more bad months than good months in the last 2 seasons that he's played. And if he wants to be called a superstar, I'm not even talking the Judge Ohtani range because they're so far and away at the top right now. If you want to be in the next tier, if you want to be with the Gunners and the Gunnar Hendersons and the Bobby Witts and throw whoever else you want to throw into that mix.
Well, I think Bobby is ascended above that. But anyway, that's besides the point. I get what you're getting at.
But Bobby's going to have a 10-win season. That's what we all thought Julio could do this year.
Yeah, and doesn't a 10-win season put you with Judge and Soto?
All right, fine. I said Judge and Ohtani. Fine. You can put Bobby and Soto
anyway,
up
but
in that category
that's
too.
nitpicking. I get I get what you're saying. He is going to need to have a full season of superstar play.
Yeah,
and that's the same thing we said in June. Was it July 1st? Yeah, July 1st.
Yeah,
same thing. Same argument. That does not change. Full season. A hot stretch would be great. He would be lauded for it. But that would not change our revised expectations for Julio going into 2025. Right. That doesn't change. You and I could do Julio's 2025 preview right now if we wanted to, because we know what we're going to say. It's going to be the same thing when we talk about it in February.
Right. He has had more bad months in the last 2 years than he has had good months. And if he wants to be called a superstar in 25, again, if you want to be with okay, fine. It doesn't have to be Bobby Witt and those guys. But again, Gunnar and Devers and whoever else you want to put into that bucket. Austin Riley when he's on top of his game. And
Corey Seager.
Corey Seager, right? Like that group. Mookie's probably in the Judge Ohtani range too, so he's ahead. But yeah, like that's that second group of superstars. Not quite the elite of elites, but still like guys that are in the MVP race every year. If you want to be called a superstar, you've got to do it start to finish. Not saying you can't have a bad 2 weeks, because everybody goes through cold stretches in a season, but for the most part, over the course of 162, you have to keep the consistent offensive play up. And over the last 2 years, that hasn't been the case.
And unfortunately, the other top prospect who came up with Julio at the same exact time is Bobby Witt Jr. And look what he's doing. Like, he might be worth 11 wins this year.
Yeah.
Like, you look at that and you see, man, you just see the duality of what baseball can do to a player. One player in his third season going through the biggest struggle he's had as a professional, and the other one peaking and playing at the 100th percentile of what he can do.
And the guy that finished second to Julio in Rookie of the Year voting that year is the best catcher in baseball.
Yeah.
Adley.
Yep.
So this is where he's at. It's just reality.
And maybe Edgar with his batting average and RBIs is the guy to unlock that.
Maybe. And again, if Julio actually goes scorched earth in the final 3 weeks, Mariners get into the playoffs, and I'm not saying this is going to happen, but I don't think a single person around this time last year, exactly a year ago, would have said, oh, the Diamondbacks are going to the World Series. But if Julio finds some way to just get the Mariners into the dance, and then he continues it into the postseason, and the starting pitching carries them, maybe we have a different conversation in the offseason. Maybe. But for right now, it's not going to happen. This is who he is at this point. It's great that he's getting hot, but the narrative on him is not going to change until he does it over a full year.
No, it will not. And the only difference is I don't think the Mariners are making the field with 84 wins like the Diamondbacks did.
Right.
Probably it would be nice. I would feel a lot better about their chances if 84 was getting you in.
Right. Also, speaking of bulletin board material from this podcast, maybe Julio is using us as bulletin board material too. Not just the team, but him. Churchill put out the stats since July 4th. This is what he's done. Or you said since July, this is what he's done. AKA the exact point in time we did our Is Julio a Superstar conversation, paired with Julio and Jared Kelenic have been the exact same offensive player over the last year and a half.
And what happened to Kelenic since then?
Oh, yeah, he's really been struggling, unfortunately.
Yeah, notice how we haven't talked about Jared Kelenic since July 1st?
It's unfortunate. I still root for the guy to be great.
I know. You know what's funny? One of my favorite baseball YouTubers, Foolish Baseball, who hopefully one day we can get on this podcast, did you see the tweet he put out?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the Braves are the National League Mariners. I got a chuckle because maybe Jared Kelenic just brings it with him wherever he goes.
Maybe. What else we got for this podcast? I know this one's going to be a little bit shorter. I guess the last thing we have here before we wrap up is to take a quick minute to talk about Luis Castillo. Now, as of time of recording, we don't have all the information. I'm guessing everybody's going to know a little bit more about his status by the time this episode airs on Wednesday. But he left the game on Sunday. Mariners PR called it hamstring strain. We don't know the severity of it, but we're waiting to find out if he's going to actually miss time or not.
Yeah, he could just be fine. We don't know how much, like, the hamstring could heal in 2 days, depending on the severity of it. They weren't willing to give details. The Mariners do have a pretty convenient replacement if Castillo needs to go on the injured list. I still think if it was just a mild strain, I'm sure he could come back by the end of the season and be healthy for a hypothetical Mariners playoff series if they needed to play it. But otherwise, I mean, Emerson Hancock is just rolling right along. It's not like, even though he has passed his innings count from last year by 21 innings, he's not being load managed at all. He's had 5 consecutive starts of 6 innings. It's been one of his best stretches in terms of volume and production in the minor leagues, especially at AAA, which is remarkably effective. We talked about it on our live stream on Sunday. I was trying to throw out just the fun idea of if they needed to load manage Emerson, could they bring up a Logan Evans or Brandon Garcia to piggyback him if they felt like one of those guys were ready? But I'm looking at it, the more I dove into it, it's just less and less likely. Logan's 23 innings past his innings count. Brandon Garcia is, get this, about 60 innings past his innings limit from last year. So Brandon Garcia won't be coming up. Both those guys have pitched really well down there in Double-A. I think that would be fun.
both those guys will probably be in Seattle at the end of the year to get some awards because they've been phenomenal. One of those guys is almost undoubtedly going to be minor league pitcher of the year. I guess you could throw Morales into that bucket too. I would still guess it's going to be either Logan Evans or Brandon Garcia. But I would assume both of those guys will receive some award in the final weekend. So they may be present in Seattle. I just don't think they're going to be pitching on the roster this year because, like you said, past their innings limit. If you look at their start by start, their pitch counts are going down. They're starting to load manage them. Paired with the AA season ends much sooner than the AAA season does. Right now, Logan Evans and Brandon Garcia are each slated to have one more start. Now, Arkansas is going to be in the playoffs, but assuming they just keep their rotation because they're not going to pitch them on 2-3 days rest or anything, it still may be their last start, especially if Arkansas loses the series.
And who are you taking off the 40-man for those guys is another question, which I don't think that's something Jerry Dipoto wants to really worry about right now when he's trying to focus on the Mariners making the playoffs. I will say with this Luis injury, we kind of just brush past this because we've taken this Mariners rotation for granted this year. It essentially puts to an end this remarkable stretch of health this rotation has had this year, which, again, will probably not happen again in the next, with this group at least, I don't know, the next 5 years. It's unlikely that they will have this many guys make this many consecutive starts without any health blemishes, especially no knock on wood arm injuries with any of them, even though they throw the most innings in baseball. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that they are the only team in baseball that has 4 161 inning starters this year. The only rotation. Kind of take that for granted. And I don't think we will truly, it will set in until Luis Castillo does not, if he doesn't start his next game.
Right. And the one guy that hasn't thrown that many innings has been arguably as dominant as any of them in Brian Wu. So, yeah, it's like Luis is only going to make 3 more starts the rest of the year. If I counted this out right, he is only slated to make 3 more starts in the regular season. So, obviously, it'd be great to have him for those 3 starts. If he can't pitch, you hope Emerson Hancock obviously can step in admirably and keep the team in the game and maybe spin a couple of great starts in his own right. Obviously, like you said, he's been pretty good in AAA. But, yeah, it's unlikely you would see Evans or Garcia. Especially because, again, like the AAA season goes almost as long as the big league season, where it wouldn't change that much in Emerson Hancock's routine for what he'd be doing on a daily basis, because he was going to pitch late into the season anyway. And if you really want to manage his innings, well, then you could have Jonathan Diaz make 1 start. He's already up on the roster right now. So if you had to manage it and fill all 3 of those Luis start days, if he's going to miss the final 3 starts of his season, you can make it work with Hancock and Diaz. As cool as it would be to see the other 2 up.
And it stinks, though, if the Mariners get hot. Like, I hope Emerson's got a little bit in the tank. Again, he's been pitching well in AAA. These would be some big starts he'd be making down the stretch. We have all the faith in the world in Emerson Hancock. He's our guy, but some big starts. Every game matters for the Mariners. And by the way, if you were keeping track, remember we made the 27-10 over the rest of the season declaration? Mm-hmm. Well, they've reached the 10.
No, so they're just going to win their final 18 in a row or whatever.
Yeah, so they'd need to win all of their remaining games to get to that point. But that's beside the fact, because even despite our declaration we made, the Mariners are somehow still in the playoff race if they can find a way to make up 3 games in the next 3 weeks in the wild card race. Like, those can be some big games Emerson's starting. So it's what you want. Like, I'll say for Emerson, he's like, yeah, give me the ball. Let's go.
It's what you want. You want to be in those situations.
But it would be nice to have Luis Castillo.
Yeah, both can be true.
Yeah.
Okay, I think that just about wraps up this edition of the Marine Layer podcast. You guys know the drill. You want to listen to the full form podcast. Make sure to download the episodes if you're listening on the audio side. Make sure to rate and review 5 stars if you're watching on YouTube. Best thing you guys can do to help us out, hit subscribe. You see the big red button. You're doing us a big favor if you do. Make sure to drop a like on the video, leave us a comment, and follow us on social media all across Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, and YouTube Shorts at Marine Layer Pod. That's TJ. I'm Lyle. As always, we thank you guys for tuning in. We'll talk to you soon.